Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. Just having a few people still connecting to audio here. Thank you all so much for coming out today. We're super excited to have you. Vic Records has put a few months of effort into this event, and we're really excited to have these incredible speakers here to lead us through this panel discussion regarding behind the scenes of music and what that means. So I'm going to jump right in here. And I want to introduce you to our two incredible speakers. First off, we have Eric Alper, who's a publicist and music commentator. For the past 25 years, Eric has been at the forefront of the Canadian entertainment industry, making the public relations his business. His enthusiasm, encyclopedic knowledge of the past and present have made him the go-to for music in Canada. He is also host of one of the top-rated Sirius XM shows, That Eric Alper. With over 1 million followers, friends, and connections across his social media platforms, it's clear to understand why he has been named a must-follow by Billboard, Paste, and National Post, amongst others. He has been a 6-time nominee for Publicist of the Year during Canadian Music Week and has worked 19 Juno Award, 35 Canadian Folk Music Award, and 60 Maple Blues Award-winning albums, and is also truly honored to work with some of the biggest and most important artists of our time, including Ringo Starr, Ray Charles, Jerry Lee Lewis, Buffy St. Mary, Merle Haggard, John Prine, Slash, The Wiggles, Steve Earle, Snoop Dogg, The Smashing Pumpkins, Little Steven, Sinead O'Connor, Sesame Street, among hundreds others. So I want to give a great round of applause and thank you to Eric Alper. And I'll introduce to you our second of our two panelists that we have here currently. We were meant to have a third panelist. They haven't arrived yet. We're hoping they do. But anyways, our second panelist here is Jeff Wolpert, Music Technology and Digital Media Director at the University of Toronto, and owner, chief engineer of Desert Fish Studios. Jeff is a multi-award winning engineer, mixer, producer, editor, and educator. Wolpert has worked with some of the biggest names in today's entertainment industry. He's the owner and chief engineer of multi-room facility, Desert Fish Studios, located in downtown Toronto, which is a Dolby certified Atmos music facility. He has won 3 Juno Awards for Recording Engineer of the Year. He's also the director of and adjunct professor in the Master of Music in Music Technology and Digital Media graduate program at the University of Toronto, where he co-authored the recently released paper entitled The Effects of Rhythmic Auditory Music Stimulation for Exercise Among Cardiac Rehabilitation Patients. Known for his mastery of recording and intricate mixing, Wolpert is also recognized for his vast musical, technical, and computer knowledge. So welcome our two panelists. I'm just going to spotlight both of them so that you are visible to the audience well. And we'll jump into our first question here.
Hi.
So first question here, we just want to get to know you a bit better. So to start off, can you tell us a bit about how you got into the music industry and what led you to choose a career behind the scenes in music? And I'll pass it over to Eric first.
Hi. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. And thank you for everybody that's hanging out somewhere, wherever you are. Look, the fact is I can't play an instrument and I suck at singing and I have no musical talent whatsoever. But when I was a really young kid, my grandfather had a bar in Toronto that's still standing called Grossman's Tavern. And I remember as a kid, always loving to go down there, hearing the bands, watching the people drink and dance and tell stories. And that's where I kind of learned that music was more than just music. Music wasn't just a bunch of people getting up on stage and playing. It was a place of community. It was a place of oral traditions and history. It was a place where people got together and laughed and cried and got in fights with one another. I saw a movie called American Hot Wax, which told the story of a Cleveland DJ named Alan Freed from the 1950s. And I saw it when I was about 8 years old. And it was a, music docudrama. And up there on the screen were actors and actresses that were playing the roles of early rock and roll people in DJs. But it also had the real life Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry. And watching those two as an 8-year-old blew my mind. It was like seeing when you see Star Wars for the first time, or you see the Beatles, or you watch Harry Potter, and you think, I want to do that. I have no idea what that entails. I have no idea what planet they're on, but I want to be a part of it. And soon after, I got a subscription to Billboard magazine when I was 12 and went to university for English and mass communications, volunteered at all the newspapers on campus and at the radio station, and just sucked. I was awful, you know. I was a horrible writer. I couldn't speak on the air. I gave away, no, and nobody was listening, which was the best thing about it. So I got to make all of my mistakes away from anybody else who cared. I mean, my show on radio was like 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. I gave away $1,000 on air to anybody that would call, and nobody did. So I knew that nobody was listening. So I just realized that I can make my mistakes and hopefully just keep getting better. And when I graduated, the day after, I started a record label and a PR company, ditched the record label side of it, and have done public relations for now 25, 26 years. So really, it was a need and a desire to be working in the Canadian music industry, but trying to figure out my place in it, trying to figure out what my passion was. I love the media. I love telling stories. I love reading about why things were happening the way that they were, why certain songs were breaking it big. I loved working by myself, but I also loved working in a team. So when I found about what Publicist did, it just seemed like a real good fit to what I wanted to do. And I was broke for a lot of years and didn't care a whit because I was doing something I loved to do. And here we are. And that led me to talking to U of T students today.
Thanks so much for that. That's really awesome. I'll pass it over to Jeff to answer that same question. Just tell us a bit about how you got into the industry and what led you to choose a career behind the scenes of music.
Sure, but first I have to say, Grossman's, that's awesome. Grossman's is a great place to go see music. Okay, so, I started off as a drummer. I actually went to music school. I had my first band called Fillet of Soul, where I was the drummer and lead singer. And the four of us are still friends. We were 15 when we started. And I just kept on, we were a little band. We needed a PA. We borrowed money. We had to figure out how to work the PA. So I started liking the tech thing. I bought a tape recorder, which at the time was a kind of giant endeavor, and figured that out a little bit on my own and stuff. And then I went to school. I got a music degree, a bachelor of music degree, and came out of school not really knowing much because I'd been playing before and I was playing now, and there wasn't that big a change between those two criteria. But there was a master's degree starting up at McGill just at the time called a Master's of Music and Sound Recording. I decided to go in and spent a couple of years there where I had a great education. Came out, moved to Toronto because I was in Montreal at the time, and the studio scene was not that good. Came here and quickly learned to tell nobody that I'd been to school for music or anything like that, because nobody believed me anyways at the time. Because previous to that, everything was done by apprenticeship, right? You came in, you made coffee, you swept the floors. Plus you needed a recording studio to make a record. It was almost unheard of that somebody had a home recording setup of any kind. The equipment was large. You needed tape machines like the one back in the corner there. You needed a lot of stuff and a specialized place and things like that. So the price of admission was high. So I hooked up with somebody through a friend of mine, a musician friend of mine, at my first studio called Inception Sound, which still exists. I stayed there for a fair amount of time, 11 years, built it up from a little tiny studio into two larger studios. We made a lot of records there. And the first record I made when I started at Inception, I actually invested. I had a fellowship from the university that I didn't need because I was playing. So I kept the money and I put it in the business when I came to Toronto. And I bought a tiny portion of the studio and went around telling everybody I owned a recording studio, knocking on doors and going to bars because there was a heavy Queen Street West scene at the time, and just introducing myself to people. And somebody I knew who was played in a band, blah, 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 put me in touch with somebody. And I did a record with a woman named Jane Siberry, who in the late 80s broke in Toronto. And that was like the first record I ever did. And it got sold to a record company, and it kind of started my career from there. That being said, the other side of it, which I'll talk about, is that there wasn't always enough work in that field to sort of keep going like that. So because I suppose you know, I could handle it, I also did a lot of music for picture. So half of what I do is music for movies and television and things like that. So I tried to do a count, and I lost count at 200 movies the other day, just trying to figure out how many things have been going on. So I've been at this for 40 years now, and 40 years since I started my first studio. And I went from there, and I left Inception. I went to a place called McClear Path A, which was kind of a legendary place in town. And then I cut from there. I just went freelance. That's it. And then I had a place at another studio in town called Phase One. I used to have a permanent place there. And then I moved downtown here, and this is my second studio downtown. And that's how it went. I will say this, it's not always straight when you want to go into something. When I told my parents I wanted to go to music school, which some of you may have tried, my mother looked at me and said, she had 3 boys, and said, if I had a daughter, I wouldn't let her go out with you. So but you know, things worked out in the end. And kind of like Eric, I will say something that I can't agree more with something that he says, that if I didn't do this to make money, I really should have done something else if I wanted to make a lot of money. That was it. But what really has kept me going, it's been purely passion. But it's worked out. Right? In a similar way, you make your mistakes. I made my mistakes at a place that I owned. So if I really made a mistake, I just did it again for free. You know, that's all that we could do at the time. And I still make mistakes, and I still solve it that way. So it's good. You know, that path got a lot of freedom. So that was cool. Anyways, that's it.
Thanks so much. I would love to ask a little bit more of like specific questions for each of you. Like Eric, I would love, first off, for you to explain just like, what do you do as a publicist? Like, what does your job entail? Because I feel like some people don't really know like what that really means behind the scenes. How does that work?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the first thing that I do is I wake up in a rock star mansion, and usually, you know, have to kick, you know, a Mick Jagger or Keith Richards or Billie Eilish just away. And I just tell them, please go away. I must work now. And then I have my staff of 40 people do whatever I need for them to do. And I just sit back and wait for the checks to roll in, take all the glory, get the gold albums and Juno Awards, and do an excessive amount of drugs and drinking. And then I just do it all again every day. But the real story is that I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, every morning, and I set up my whole day of social media. I'm never usually on it as much as people think I am, but I usually set up the whole day of Twitter and Facebook and what I'm going to post. And then the job kind of begins at 7 o'clock in the morning, because when you're working artists that are known across the country or around the world, you kind of have to play based on people's time zone too. So I have a lot of artists on the East Coast in Halifax, for instance, right now. So 8 o'clock in the morning, my time is 9 o'clock, 9:30 their time. So the media is already there. So I kind of like to get a little bit of a head start on things. But really, a publicist, they do everything. They're the kind of liaison between the artist and the media. I help write the bios, go over any photos that they want to send to the media, pick the photos. A lot of the times I'm picking the songs that are going to radio stations in order to get played. I let them know about my choices for ideas for videos that I think are going to attract attention in the media. Help them write the bio, help them write, and then I usually take all of the assets that they have, the MP3, the WAV files, the social links, and then I create a press release for them to approve. And then once they approve, then I send it out around the world, here in Canada, all of the places that are applicable, whether it's rock or jazz or soul or R&B or rap or hip hop. And then I start to do follow-up. with trying to get interviews with the artists and the media, trying to get previews for shows that are in concert that are happening for the first time in like 2 years. Um, and generally trying to get as much attention on the record as possible, whether it's working with traditional media outlets like newspapers, radio stations, television stations, or working with people that have Spotify playlists that are the new influencers and the new generation of media, really, because a lot of these people that have TikTok channels or YouTube channels or Spotify playlists sometimes have more, the same, if not more influence than your daily newspaper in a small town these days. So that's what I kind of do is work alongside the artist to help spread the word using media and technology in order to help get them huge and massive around the world.
Thanks so much. That was very descriptive. I like what you brought up about the unprecedented time and the fact that we're coming back to live shows nowadays. And I want to come back to that later on in this conversation. So keep that in mind. And Jeff, the next question here for you is just, how does a university education in music really prepare students for a career in the industry? Like, I know you said you went to music school. How does that like prepare someone to become a part of the music industry or work behind the scenes or become an artist, either or?
Right. Okay. Well, there's some argument as whether it does, but look, from a music point of view, there's no doubt it's not absolutely necessary because to be a great musician doesn't mean you went to university or anything like that. We all know that that's true. However, for what I do, which is mostly working with live players, and being literate, I can basically read whatever I need to be able to read. I can follow a score, all that sort of stuff. That's actually helped a great deal over my career. I'm a quick study. In other words, if we hear the song, I've got the form down and all that sort of stuff. So that basically I become one of the guys or one of the people while we're working, and not the person who somebody has to really take a long time to describe where in the song they want to go from or something like that. So that if you're literate, you become one of the gang, and that tends to relax everybody because they feel they're in good hands and stuff like that. So being basically musically literate is helpful in the production end of things, and which is where I am. So I'm on the production side, and so that's really really a good idea. The other stuff is the tech stuff. Again, there's a lot of learning material out there. You don't necessarily have to go to university, but it just depends on how deep you want to understand the tech. If you want somebody to tell you, hey, this is what you do to get a bass drum sound or a kick drum sound, there's tons of YouTube and stuff out there. If, however, you want to develop your own thing, it's kind of good to know how it works. And if you know how it works, then you can make your own decision, not based on what somebody told you, which is imitation, but on you can kind of go down that path of discovery, that's what the education did for me. It gave me tools to say, I know what I want, and now I have a reasonable idea of how to get there. A lot of people come to say, hey, I heard this great thing and I got to find somebody to show me how to get it. That's not how I work or how I've worked. So the idea that you can have style, you can have some individual sort of footprint and stuff like that, that's a big deal. And you have to be prepared. Some people won't like it. That's how that works. But it's a good thing. So I think that bravery to do your own thing came from my feeling that I had this information with me, and I probably missed out on a lot of stuff just letting people tell me how to do things and things like that, but it kept me going and still keeps me totally interested. It's given me longevity, if nothing else. I turned 65 this year, and I still have no idea. I'm on that Freedom 85 plan, basically, is what I'm looking at. So, so there you go. So it's really helped a lot from the knowing how to research, knowing how to problem solve, all that that kind of basic stuff, and then on top of it, the musical literacy thing, which you could gain elsewhere. Look, you could have taken piano lessons all your life or whatever. All that stuff. Be a similar kind of thing. But it really has helped. It's especially helped on the big sessions, where there's 70 people out there, and the time is expensive. We're burning $5,000 a minute at that point. You know what I mean? So the speed really helps, and that really came from understanding where we're at, what we're doing, and where we're going. So,
Definitely. Thank you so much. Our third speaker here has arrived, so I'm just want to introduce them as well to the audience here. So Roy Hamilton III is our third speaker. I'm just going to spotlight them now. There we go. Roy Hamilton is an American Grammy nominated, multi-award winning music producer, songwriter, and A&R executive. Collectively, these skills and abilities have helped to sell over 70 million albums worldwide for record labels and artists like Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, Justin Bieber, NSync, the Backstreet Boys, Austin French, Justin Timberlake, Ariana Grande, Capitol Records, RCA Records, Universal Music Group, and many more. Roy is also the grandson of the legendary R&B pop singer Roy Hamilton, best known for You'll Never Walk Alone, Unchained Melody, Ebb Tide, You Can Have Her, and many more. So I would like to welcome Roy Hamilton. And Roy, can you tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into the industry, and what led you to choose a career behind the scenes in music?
Hey, how you doing, man? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Cool, thanks. So your first question is, how did I get into the music industry?
Yeah.
I was actually born in a family that was already very, I guess, full-time in the music business. At the time, my grandfather was an amazing singer in his day and left quite a legacy for my dad as well, who sings professionally in Las Vegas on a regular basis and tours around America. And I don't know, I guess somewhere around, pre-teens, I started to really have an interest in what the recording process was like. And I remember going to the recording studio with my dad when I was 14. And it was interesting because I came there to sing backup vocals on one of his songs. And I had rehearsed a lot and everything, but I didn't really feel that confident with singing. But I went through with it, with my nerves and everything, went to the studio, did the background vocals. Like my nerves were shot. I was like sweating and everything. It was really bad. And then when I was done, and they said I can go sit in the control room where the engineers were, where the producers and everything were. So I went in there and I sat down on the sofa. And I remember just this really amazing feeling of inspiration and calm and wonder started to come over me as I was watching what the guys were doing at the board and the sounds. And I remember that day, I was like, well, the singing thing, I doubt that I'm going to do that professionally, but this part of it, I love, I can see myself doing. So I started getting a little bit closer to the control board and was asking questions, and the guys were really nice. And they would just answering questions and just showing me a couple of things that they were doing. And pretty much that's when I knew I would become a music producer. I had no idea that my career would take me to all the different places that it's taken me to, or work with the different artists that I've had the pleasure and the honor to work with. But it all really stemmed from there. And after I left the studio that day, I started trying to learn everything I could about sound, how music works, how the piano chords were played and theory of it. And I became really obsessed with that part of music. So yeah, that's how I started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it's great to have you here. Thank you for coming. We're very excited to have you. My next question that will actually be to all three of you is, what is some advice you would give students in their undergrad now wanting to pursue your profession? What do you think they could do right now? Like, what's the next step they could take to really get into maybe pursuing the profession that you take on? And I'll pass it over to Eric to start.
Read a lot. The greatest thing that I can say about your generation is the sheer amount of information that's available at the fingertips, and it's free. You don't have to go and really network in the same way that we had to. You still have to network to a certain extent, but there wasn't really a whole lot of people to teach you, except if you got an internship and maybe you were filing somewhere. But the ability that you could say in my industry, in 15 minutes, you can get hundreds and hundreds of websites and examples on how to write a bio, how to write a press release, how to get your music up on Spotify, how to have Spotify work for you rather than against you, how to book your own tour. Every contact information for everybody is seemingly under the sun for free. But it's only there if you go for it. You know, going back to the idea that I had to get a subscription to Billboard magazine as a kid, it was because I loved reading the stories about the people and I wanted to know exactly what they did. It was the only way to find out. I had no access to record labels. I didn't know any booking agents. I might have known a couple of bands here and there, but they weren't going to help me out. So a lot of the times it was just reading. It was reading all sorts of books and autobiographies and websites at the time. I mean, it took you 15 minutes to download a page, but it was there. So the lack of information for any job is just a really sad excuse. It doesn't hold any water anymore. The best thing I can tell you for your next years of university is that, you know, you get to learn how to deal with people. You get to learn how to deal with the whole world in a little bit of a microcosm. This is your opportunity to try different things. If you know you want to work in the music industry, but maybe not in front of the stage, you know, there's lots of places out there that would love to have volunteers or shadow or learn how to do everything from bookings to management to stage managing to tech stuff to record label to sound engineers and producers and all sorts of things. So the ability for you to try, if you haven't found what your passion is much better these days than it ever was. And you might have to do it yourself for a long time until somebody notices you and plucks you out of obscurity and takes you on a little bit of a ride to success. But that's okay, because you get to learn all aspects when you get to do it yourself. You get to learn how to run a business. You might get to learn time management or how to pay a bill or all those little things that sometimes people just take for granted. So the next 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, however long you're in university for, use this opportunity as a way to kind of figure out what you want to do. This is your time. The spotlight isn't on you, and it doesn't have to be on you at all, but use this time for your benefit.
Thank you so much. I'll pass that over to Jeff to answer that question next. If you want me to repeat it, let me know.
Okay, sure. So no, it's I think from my point of view, so for the kind of engineering kind of thing, you need to start listening. So everybody listens to music and you know the tune and you might know the words and maybe you can rap along with the entire thing and you know every inflection and stuff like that. That's cool. That's kind of the top line we're talking about. But if you want to know how to make a record, you need to be able to listen inside to what's going on and put together the parts. Formal word would be recording analysis, right? So what you really got to start listening. Listen to your favorite stuff on some kind of decent way to listen. So headphones are probably kind of the de facto thing that you're going to be listening on, and that's kind of the way it goes. But streaming off Spotify, kind of off your phone while walking around in a noisy environment is probably not the best way to do that. So if you can find a quiet spot or somewhere, maybe your Vic recording studio or something like that, you can listen to. It pays to have a little more hi-fi situation. I know there's an argument against that. Okay, nobody listens like that, so we shouldn't. But that's not what you're trying to figure out what's going on. So that kind of high-resolution listening makes a lot of sense in this context. And try to figure out what's happening. So try to listen to every individual sound that's going on, and write them down. See if you can even identify them. It may surprise you to a big extent to what exactly is going on. So because soon enough, you'll figure out, oh, there's that sound, and I heard it before. And is that really one person singing, or is that two people singing? And where are they panned? And is there some kind of effect on them or something like that? And then the more you listen, the more you kind of identify the stuff, the bigger your vocabulary gets. And the next time you want to do something, you'll have an idea of what it was. So at some point, you got to put that together with trying to make the sound. So if you have get yourself some software on your laptop, GarageBand is fine. If you're a Mac user or Fruity Loops or anything like that, they're all the same. They're all the software is exactly the same underneath the skin. It really does look a little different here, but honestly, they all kind of work the same. So one's not better than the other. That's not the issue. And try to put something together. So yeah, it starts with listening. You got, this is the easiest and best time. By the way, it's also the time that your hearing is the best and all that stuff. You have the most acute hearing when you're young. So go for it. Listen to as much as you can and start taking notes.
I really like that. I think that's a really cool method of getting into things. And I think that, like, honestly, like, that's something that I do myself, even just as a music enthusiast and music creator myself. And so I think that's such a cool way to look at things about how to view music. Just like sit there and listen to it. Actually listen, not just let it sit there in the background. Listen.
Yeah.
Pass over to Roy.
Yeah, I like that answer. I like both of you guys' answer, Jeff. I like your answer as well about listening. I remember, again, when I first started being really interested in the inner workings of music, I started to hear differently. Started to hear music differently, and you could hear the sounds behind the sounds, and you start to really develop, your sense of the stereo field and wow, some things are happening over here. And I've had a number of projects that I work with. I'll probably say it's even happened with the Cardia project too, where from working on the music, you just start to hear things behind the track, and it's like, oh, well, if we can do that, what else can we do? And it helps you kind of, get more experimental. But reading is very, very important. I actually battle with like somewhat of a dyslexia issue a lot as I was growing up. But I kind of went through it and continued to read until I got to a point where I could actually read. But then I found that audiobooks, because I'm such a sound person, listening to the audiobooks and listening to different interviews and podcasts was a way that I can retain a lot more information and knowledge. So I began to rely on that as a way. Another thing that I think is huge is mentorship. As much as I would like to say reading and listening help, it was those mentors that allowed me to be in the studio with them, and producers that I worked under that mentored me, and songwriters and music business people that without those people, saying, hey, here, let me show you how this is done, show you some things that I know you just wouldn't know unless you've put in the 10,000 hours. Those mentors. So I say find some great mentors, continue to read, always keep your ears open. And another thing that works for me is you have to get out there and kind of sell yourself a bit, and let people know you're there. Like, kind of like, you hear that word, stand up and be counted. Like, go for it. You're gonna hear a lot of no's before you get those yeses, where people are going to actually give you an opportunity. And every matchup isn't the perfect matchup. So you have to continue to try to network to find those people that you naturally gel with and you naturally have a chemistry with, to not only work with but also to learn from. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. And I really like that. I think mentorship is so important. It's something that is always prevalent in any career, but especially in music, because it is sometimes difficult to get into the industry, but it is finding that person who can help you and finding that person in your life, or finding someone that maybe you don't know and reaching out and hopefully allowing them to help you and work with them.
Absolutely, because most guys like us that you get to our stage in the industry, we're happy to work with that young up and coming energy, and it feeds our soul too. It's like, man, to see that excitement, and it's like, yes, it becomes symbiotic. And so yeah, we're us veterans, if you want to use that word, we're here to help. That's what we do. We're here to share what we learned and pay it forward. So.
Yeah, actually, leading into that, I think I would love to ask a question here from our audience that I was given. With a long music career, what are challenges you faced given the fast evolving nature and of the music industry? How have you adapted to changes over the course of your career? And especially when it comes to changes regarding like the music that is actually like present and like people are really enjoying, like how have you adapted your career to that?
Who are we asking? Me first?
Sure, go ahead. Why not?
No, not me. I was
Okay.
I think Eric's mic is muted. Eric, go for it.
No, 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 no. Go, 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 go.
Okay, so for me, a major change, I'm sure, and for all of us, the past 2 years, with a lot of us being forced who weren't already doing a lot of your work virtually. And I tell you honestly, before 2020, I'd never done a virtual, any sort of recording or production session before that. In my mind, ever since I can remember, you went into a studio with the people who you were working with on different occasions, and you made records. And I always knew that Zoom was there, Skype and all these things, but I didn't connect. Oh, wait, producing virtually. So adapting to that model to do a lot of my work now has been a big change for me in a positive way, for both personal and professional reasons. So I would say that's been one major development. Before that, the ability for all of us as creators to just start releasing our own music. Again, when I started out, that wasn't even thought of. It's like, okay, you had to go to a record label. Yeah, there was like this way. It was the way, right? And then now we have other ways to get your music out. And I've enjoyed, all of these different changes. And for me as an entrepreneur and a person that has worked for record labels, but also has my own company, I enjoy the ability to work with independent artists. And we do have a new way that we can go about getting our records out. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think he touches on such a great point. When we were growing up, the only way to get your music out there is if you landed a record label deal. That was it. That was the only way that you could even have a different neighborhood know who you are. Forget about booking a gig. Now, seemingly, you can record your own song, upload it onto Spotify within the day. And that's where you end up with 190,000 songs a day being uploaded, and then 240,000 songs on Friday for New Music Friday. So somewhere in the middle is happiness. Sometimes it's too much music for, the competition to handle. And sometimes, that's the breaks. Only the strong will survive. Only the great songs will get heard. But it was always like that. The overwhelmingness, I think, that people feel right now due to not being able to play or hang out for 2 years, I think it's only natural because we actually had that ability, but we didn't really have that ability for a very long time. There weren't a lot of artists out there compared to the amount of releases that were out there that even got to play a show, that even got to play live to begin with. So the fact that we've gone through so much changes in the last 2 years, but the industry has always been changing, and you just have to kind of hold on a little bit and again read what you can to find out how other people are not just surviving but thriving in this as well. During COVID, it seemed like every song that I was getting was about isolation, loneliness, breakups. They were sad songs, and now that the world is opening up again, it seems like there's a little bit more upbeat songs. So it's always changing, it's always evolving. But for me personally, the driving force out of all of it is just that fear of rejection. I send out on average, 15,000, 16,000 emails a day. If I get 60 of them back for an interview request, I had a really amazing day. So, you got to be able to take rejection, or at least know that sometimes the reason why they're saying no has nothing to do with you or nothing to do with the music. Sometimes it's that there's not enough pages to write about music because the war in the Ukraine is taking up a lot of people's spaces. Sometimes Kristen Stewart and her fiance have their first public outing, and that's it. That's what takes away all the entertainment stuff. So your competition isn't another artist. Your competition is now really anybody trying to make news from around the world. So you got to have a little bit of a thick skin and know that tomorrow's another day, so you can go and fight the battle again.
Do you want yet another answer for this question?
It's up to you. I'm happy to ask more specific questions.
I could take it from the tech side, but why don't we move on, just because there might be other questions. I don't want to kind of
Yeah, no worries. I got two more questions here. The first one here is actually for you, Jeff, actually. Just like, what kind of skills, technical or otherwise, are needed to properly run a recording studio?
Well, yeah, there's some tech skill. I mean, it's changed, right? When I started, you had to be able to solder and we used to do all our own maintenance, and the machines were, they're giant washing machines. They were really kind of complicated. We used to use our hands to heat sink things, and I'd be under a lot of equipment and all that sort of stuff. So I still have some gear, and I still do a bit of that, but most things just kind of hook up pretty easily. So the tech skills are different. It's good to be computer literate. Obviously, you need some computer literacy. It's not huge, but you need something like that. Look, if you're talking about a recording studio and you're talking about a small or an independent recording studio, you're talking about a small business. If you're talking about a small business, then you have the same issues that everybody has. You got to know who your market is, understand and try to reach them. Don't go chasing every little thing because it's just too hard. And if you're one person or two people, you just don't have time to do all that sort of stuff. You got to get financed one way or another. When I first started out, I used to dress up in a suit and go to the bank and fail every time until I walked in one day in jeans and a t-shirt and said, look, I'm going to build this thing whether you help me or not. And they went, okay, we'll help you. And you got to be yourself when it comes to that sort of stuff. You can't pretend to be something else. You need to have some integrity. And by that, I mean, I know we're being recorded. Don't bullshit people. Don't tell them you can do something you can't do. It's just going to come around to bite you and all that said. And if you don't know, and by the way, if you make a mistake and, oh God, I made mistakes, just own up to it and fix it. That's the answer right away. Like right away. Don't let it fester. Every time I've tried to pull my way out of something, it's just been a problem. And I wish I'd learned that lesson myself better, but there you go. So yeah, small business can be tough, but there's a lot of help out there, and the bank, strangely enough, over time becomes your friend. And it wasn't until I got to university I started spending other people's money, and let me tell you, that's fun. But that's not how it works most of the time. So yeah, it's a small business. You need those skills. You might need to learn a little bit of accounting and so on and so forth, and all the people skills that anybody else needs and that sort of stuff. Versus the specific engineering stuff, that's your shop. That's what you do. That's your trade. But the running the studio part, it's a small business.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot more than just the one thing that you're focusing on for the actual work itself. It's always like everything else behind the scenes too, working on anything that needs to make the actual business work.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we save some time for some questions from the audience, but one more question that we had for you is just, what is one of the biggest or one of the obstacles you really faced in your career, and how did you overcome it? What did you work through it? And I'll pass it over to Roy to start off if you feel comfortable, but anyone else can jump in if they want. You're muted, Roy. Sorry.
I was just actually thinking about that question. Wow. I don't know. Well, I did mention, like I said, dyslexia, and then figuring out I can listen to audiobooks to help so I don't have to struggle so hard. It's like I can will myself into reading this. Okay, wait, okay, yeah, I'm hearing it, I'm getting it, I'm retaining it. Beautiful. Another situation I'd say I had, it was this pivotal point in my life. I was around 27, 28 years old, and the music industry was quickly changing. So I'm talking about, 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009, right around the time when I made this huge decision to drop everything and go to Berklee College of Music and pursue the new music, that what I call like, oh, here's where music business is going. And at the time, it was tough because it was I was having some cognitive issues with like, okay, I'm almost 30, I'm about to go to college, but I feel like I need to do this because the industry that I'm coming from, it's so much of this other stuff I don't get, but I know it's coming. So it was just kind of like taking that leap of faith. And after I left Capitol Records, I was living in LA, and I had to move back to the East Coast, to New York and to New Jersey. And about a year after that, I was researching schools, and a friend of mine mentioned, that Berklee had a great music business and artist management program. And I can do, because Berklee's such a forward-thinking school, there was a hybrid program. I can go have online classes, I can attend, could do experience. So it was this really cool thing. And I'm really glad that I kind of pushed through that hesitation of going that route, at what I believed at that time was like, okay, I'm a little bit older to be going here. Is this gonna make sense. And it actually did. It actually opened up my brain to being able to like learn a lot of things and learn so much about what was kind of already this up and coming independent movement that I wasn't really aware of yet at the time, you know, because I was still so tuned into like the upper crust of the music, the majors and every, you know, everything there. So that was I'd say that was the other major challenge. And I'm glad that I pushed. I mean, yes, I'm very happy that I pushed through those fears and doubts and went through with it. Because yeah, it opened up, it helped me to transition to where I am now in the music industry, which was huge. And it gave me the freedom and the flexibility to even come to Canada and open up a new market for myself. Like people thought, you know, that would be hard to do. And it was tough and it takes a lot of hard work, but you know, anything's possible, I believe, when you have your plans together and you know, you gotta have some luck, some grace with you and all that. And you gotta work really hard though. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of nights sitting in Toronto and I'm like, what the boop am I doing here? What, you know, stuff like that. And then you realize, oh, all of these things are lined up for a reason. And it just keeps going. I can't stress it enough. Yeah, it just keeps going on and on.
You know what's amazing when I'm listening to Roy and Jeff, you know, the one thing that I think people forget is that we're really in service to the artist. And I think that if anybody, if you know, to try to figure out what the struggle was, you know, it's owning your own business. It's doing all those little things. It's paying the bills on time. It's knowing that if you feel like crap one day and you don't feel like working, nothing will get done. But it's, for me, and it wasn't because of I had an ego whatsoever. It was when I realized that I loved working for, by, and with the artist. So whatever they really wanted to do, I was in service to them. It was my job to help them get the spotlight. It was them to see their creative vision through. So if you're not willing to help somebody else achieve their dreams, you might want to get out of this industry, because whether you're producing or mixing or a publicist or a record label, you're really thinking about other people all the time. You're thinking about what the media wants. You're thinking about what Spotify will think of this song. You're thinking about what the record label will do. You're looking for a manager. What do they think of this photo? You're always trying to figure out how not to second guess yourself all the time. And so what I do is just try to have that attitude of, I'm here for the artist. And for some people who don't want to work for somebody else, it might be a little bit of a shock of just how much your needs may not be met in working in the music industry. But you know, things are changing. You got a lot of really great mental health avenues and aspects, and a lot of really great support from at least the 3 of us and 4 of us and 5 of us that are here. So I would just, that's what continues to drive me and keeps me going, is knowing that every day there's new artists to work, there's new songs to work, and new relationships to be formed.
Awesome. I love listening to these guys, by the way.
I'm happy for Jeff. Feel free to answer the question as well. Like, what's
Can
one
you repeat the
obstacle?
question for me, just so I know
Yeah.
what
No
I'm
worries. So, what is one obstacle you faced throughout your career, and how did you overcome it?
Wow. Well, if I think about an obstacle, I mean, there is the I think Eric said, you know, when you do like when you make people's records with them, and a lot of the stuff I do, especially in the last few years, like I used to do a lot of travel, and I've had a lot of good luck traveling. It's been lots of fun to work in all kinds of places, but the last couple of years, obviously not. And even as I'm getting older, a couple of years before that, I've kind of slowed that down. So most of what I do these days is mix people's records that they send to me. And the, you know, a lot of it's in absentia, like you're saying, like there's not even anybody around when I'm doing it. And so, and then I'm sending it back, or maybe we're online live or anything like that. So the thing to get over is that not everybody will like what you do all the time. And you just gotta go with it at that point in time, and realize it's not you that they don't like or anything like that. It's just that, you know, maybe like sometimes I'll go out on a limb, and so the phrase I keep in the back of my mind when I know I'm doing something that somebody may object to is I keep on saying, this could suck. So the I'm gonna try it because I'm independent enough in my situation that nobody is gonna feel it if I have to correct something. In other words, I'm not gonna charge them or anything like that. So there's a certain freedom in that experimentation, which has kept me, which has led to a lot of bad experiments, but it's also led to a few things that I do that not everybody else does, or that I know how to do myself in my own way, and that sort of stuff. So the freedom to make mistakes is important when you're dealing with a situation that has an infinite number of variables, right? And that's the problem, right? I mean, that's where, so the people ask me, well, how do you start a mix or something like that? And the first thing I said is, okay, first, it's kind of like sculpting. A lot of the time, it's about what you take away. So and because, you know, because there's a million possibilities on everything, I go, okay, well, that's okay. But what bag is it in? What are you looking for? If we can give me something that sounds like it or something like that, then we can sort of sculpt away all the stuff that doesn't really apply. And then we can move forward. So I think it's important to have the to get over your ego, which is always a problem in these situations when people don't like what you do. But just having the method I've used to get over that problem is giving myself the freedom to suck, basically, and to just make a mistake, and then I just go, yeah, that didn't work, you know, and just admit it and move on. Because I can't tell you the number of times I've spent hours trying to do so, especially in this immersive business with 8,000 directions and stuff like that. And I used to work, like I started on this early because I did a bunch of IMAX stuff, and IMAX has a multi-channel sound system, you know, from early on. And we used to spend hours trying to make rotations of the space station thing with the shuttle going around it and the bay doors open. And then after 4 hours, I go, yeah, I have no idea what's going on. I've just taken 4 hours to make something that I really know that's not happening, you know? And so, but you don't know, right? You just don't know. So you got it. That's that, you know, forget 10,000 hours. By this time, it's 100,000 hours of fooling around till you find that thing, you know, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, the challenge is not sucking, but the way to get around it is to experiment and give yourself the freedom to do that.
Thank you so much. And so that concludes my questions, but I really want to hear from the audience here. So if anyone has a question from the audience, please raise your hand, put it in the chat. We want to know like what you want to ask these three amazing speakers. Feel free to raise your hand or put a message in the chat there. Also, as well, anyone who's here in attendance, Celia, one of the other execs, is going to put a link in the chat now. This is for our gift card giveaway, just as a thank you for attending and coming out to the event. Feel free to fill that out, and we will be giving away a couple gift cards to a couple random people who came. Anyways, 4 questions here. I did just receive a question in the chat myself. I'm just trying to pull it up so I can actually see it. Give me a second. Where'd it go? Just wondering, like, where is this question here? Okay. How have streaming, social media, and COVID-19 changed the way that you create, collaborate, and market music? I think you might have answered this a little bit before, but is there anything else you want to add to that? Anything different? If not, I'm happy to jump into one of the other questions as well.
I've never worked harder or longer or better or faster than my entire life in the last 2 years. I'm working 18-hour days and I love it. Working has kept me sane, and it keeps my focus on trying to do as much as I can without realizing that there's death and destruction out the door right beside me and people are arguing about masks, and people are arguing about vaccines, you know, fuck off, I'm trying to get a song on the radio, this is important stuff here. So it's kept my level of like, this is the greatest, most important thing in the world, to like, maybe it's not, but I love it. And so it's really renewed my focus, working from, again, like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. And I wouldn't want to have it any other day.
Definitely. I think that's so important. I think honestly, like for some, this pandemic has been a life changer. They've made incredible moves in their careers, incredible moves in their lives. For others, it's been really hard on them. And I think that honestly, like this has been such an incredible and changing time. I'll jump into this first question here from Annie. What is one mistake that you see upcoming artists make in this industry? And I'm happy for anyone here to jump in and take this on.
I can't really answer to the artist thing so much because, you know, by the time I see them, they're already kind of into it. And it's but I can tell you that from an engineer's point of view and stuff like that, is that you should really be working with the people who are at the same level you're at, like your friends and stuff like that. As they progress, so will you, kind of a thing and stuff like that. So the mistake is you feel bad because you can't work with your idol right off the top. Like that's probably not going to happen because there's, you know, a certain amount of money at stake and all that sort of stuff like that. So you got to realize that it's a long career and start working with what's around you. Like don't let it be an impediment to your getting started because you can't be a star right away, if you know what I mean. Just get started. So people who wait because they don't think it's worth it, they've got the wrong idea. It is worth it.
And there's no overnight successes. Like we're in an industry that sells dreams, like Hollywood. But just because you hadn't heard of Olivia Rodrigo on January the 5th, and then January the 7th, she releases Driver's License and hits #1 on Billboard, doesn't mean that she suddenly just blew up. She's been working at this for 2 years. People like Billie Eilish for 3 years. People like Lorde put her music on SoundCloud when she was 12. She signed her first record deal at 13, 3 years, 4 years before her major label release. So don't get caught up into what everybody else is doing in terms of success. You have no idea how many people it takes to have a 1 million streamed song or its success. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of talent, but it's also a lot of hardworking people working behind the scenes that you may not even see. So the comparison of like, I can't tell you how many artists in their first and second song, you know, have this vision that suddenly they're going to get 100,000 streams like that. It's like, you're not offering anybody anything, you know? So that would be probably the biggest mistake I see. It's just temper the expectations. You're in it for the long haul.
You're muted, Roy.
I like that answer too, Eric.
Exactly what I'm talking.
Oh yeah. One of the things that I noticed that these I guess younger up and coming artists aren't doing as much these days and is leveraging each other's fan bases and trying to work together to get out of their immediate social circle. And I try to talk about this with different artists and pitch ideas because I know in other fields of business, this works quite well. This sort of like build a coalition and you all kind of go at this together, although you're your own, you know, animal, so to speak. But, you know, like four of us are gonna get together, you got your brand, and hey, when I post something, can you repost it, or I'll do the same. And you kind of build this network together as you're all heading towards the same place. And I think a lot of the younger artists, they kind of see each other as competition in a way, which is also true. But when I came up in a time when hip hop, without that sort of these artists collaborating and pushing each other, even though they were different artists, our hip hop music scene wouldn't have become what it became. And I've seen in a number of different examples when artists do that together, it really helps get them out of their region, out of their neighborhood, into the, you know, and so forth. So I like to see more of that going on. it's a powerful strategy.
And it's so important. I think like that collaboration idea has kind of fallen away a bit, but it's been so important through all walks of like creation and like artists and creators, even like things like YouTube, that kind of stuff. Like it's really important that when you are a smaller artist or creator, like to really like reach out and get those collaborations going on, because that will get you that experience, that new connections and new followers, and who knows who you're going to meet from that point on. I think that's really awesome. And next question here from Camille. I think it's mostly for Eric here, but just any recommendations for finding a publicist?
Call me. Send me an email. I'm always happy to work artists that are first starting out, are on their 9th album or their 20th album. So you can always ask other artists who you admire, who are doing really good work, who they're working with. But for me, I'm always happy to take calls, emails, DMs, anything. Just go to thatericalper.com.
Awesome. I think that honestly might be a good way to segue, not away from the questions, but also just into the three of you. If you would like to share any connections or just like pages that you want to share, or ways that people can get in contact with you if they wanted to reach out to you about anything in the future as well. If you want to put that in the chat or share it out loud.
I can put so our website is thesingerscompany.com, and I'll put my email in the chat as well for anyone that wants to reach out.
Amazing.
Questions. The guys are here and I can't go get the door, so if you want to go to okay, thanks.
And while they're doing that, I'd love to move on to the next question here from Grace. Who was the most memorable client that you have worked with?
Okay, so I don't know. You've all had huge experience and stuff like that. So going, I think at this point I'll say James Brown. Wow. That was him and Aretha, and Aretha Franklin, and Aretha was wild because she really knew what she was doing. It was spectacular. Like she knew where she was in the tune, and she knew where she sang a lick. Like we did, you do a bunch of takes. She knew which track, which take, what was going in the comp, and so it was outrageous. James Brown was really a trip. Oh man! The first thing I went up to him and I said, "Hey, James, it's really nice to meet you. That was my first mistake." He said, "That's Mr. Brown." And then he asked my name. He said, "Jeff Walpert," but he paid it back. He said, "Mr. Walpert, nice to meet you," right? And that sort of stuff. And the other little freaky thing about him, because he'd been in the business so long and stuff like that. So I don't know. At some point, it came out. Not that it matters here, but I speak a little Yiddish, and so does he. So did he. It freaked me out. It absolutely freaked me out. He dropped a couple of phrases at me just to blow my head up. I know it was kind of awesome, really. It was one of those once in a lifetime situations. So there you go. That's my story.
Amazing. Do either of Roy or Eric have a story they want to share about their favorite client or most memorable client? It doesn't have to be their favorite. It could be something completely different, just most memorable.
For me, it was working Ringo Starr. He's a Beatle. Like, fuck off. Like, you're not gonna get any better, more popular. James is great. Aretha, I will fall on their feet. But for me personally, I grew up and still do listen to the Beatles, and I had 72,000 questions I wanted to ask him, and I couldn't get through any of them because A, I was there to work, but B, I was just too afraid. And so I've been tongue-tied a couple of times. I mean, a lot of times. Look, I'm sure Roy and Jeff would say the same thing. We're working with people who we grew up with, admiring and buying their records and going to their concerts. And Roy's hanging out with people who are like the builders of this music industry that we're also fortunate to be a part of. And I spent a fortune in the 80s and 90s going to see these bands that I'm working. So I'm still a fan. I still get star fucked. I still get like ridiculous. Even this week, I'm starting to work with a band who like I went on my first date as a teenager to go and see. And I told them, and I'm like, I had my first kiss in front of you people. Like, thank you for that, because I think at the end of it all, we're still fans of music. We're still fans of these musicians. And it's why I still do it. I may not work with a lot of these classic rockers every single day, but I'm a fan of everybody that I work with. Whether you're 15 years old and first starting out, I have to love your music and what you do and the story that you told, the story that you tell. So yeah, for me, it was Ringo all the way.
That was a good one. So I actually saw James Brown perform live once. I was at the BMI Awards accepting an award, and he performed with Pharrell. Pharrell was playing the drums. I think Roddy Jerkins on keyboards, and like they just did this whole tribute for James. And it was amazing to see James, man. That was great because he was a really big influence for me. I always used to take little bits and pieces of his break beats and throw them into some of my records. Funky Drummer being the all-time favorite and most famous. I say the most memorable experience wasn't working directly with an artist, well, the artist in his own right. It was the time I got to spend working with Clive Davis. And I remember the very first time I was meeting Clive Davis to play him some of the songs, some demos, because they were looking for songs for a few artists. And I had the pleasure of going to play my songs for him personally. And when I realized how important the song itself, not the production, not anything else, but the song is, because 15 minutes before the meeting, my manager got a call saying, hey, Clive said to make sure you bring lyric sheets of these songs, printed out lyric sheets of the songs to come. And that was the first time anyone has ever asked me to do that coming into a pitch meeting, because I would just come in with my CD and they listen to the songs. But he was very specific because he wanted to review the text of the song and he wanted to talk about the song. And literally, when I was in a room with him, he was asking me about the lyric, and we had a dialogue and a conversation. He wasn't talking about, oh, the kick drum, right? He was like, the lyrics. And he gave me these subtle changes to make with the lyrics and even melody changes that my right hand. It helped these couple of songs so much. And I always kept those things that he was explaining to me. That was a big meeting. And things like that, that's what I mean. Mentorship, even if it comes in the form of a 20, 30-minute meeting with someone that knows the road, it can change your life. That was super memorable. And there's other ones, but that's the one I wanted to bring up about the song itself. Songs. We're all here because at some point we heard a song and it gave us the goosebumps and we were like lifers. It's like, okay, I'm in. This song thing, these melody and lyrics, sign me up. This just comes back to the songs.
Definitely. No, I think that's really cool. And that's amazing to hear these people you've all worked with. That's incredible. One thing, so we're nearing the end of our time here just because I don't want to keep people past our time here. And so my last question really that I have, and I think is something that is just like, do you have any last things you want to share with the audience, these upcoming artists, upcoming people in the music industry, and our club as a whole? Is there anything last year where you want to share? And I'll pass it over to Jeff to start.
Any last things and stuff like that. So look, the biggest thing is like it's pretty easy to get in at this point in time in terms of starting to make music and that sort of thing. So you have to get started. So just get started and just do it for yourself when you're starting off and stuff like that. And that thing I said before is look to your friends, look to your pals, look to your peers and stuff like that. Make music with them. And if that's what you want to do. I don't really have any I think big life lessons other than every time I've made any money, I've put it back into myself that's been the best investment I ever made. And And I just, I looked around, and the people that I knew, I started with them, and some of them did really well. You know what I mean? And that's what started it off. So look close. Yes, you have to have big goals and all that sort of stuff like that, but don't forget what's really just right in front of your eyes and stuff like that. There's a way in, and that's really the key. Things you can't get started till you get started. So you may as well just do it. And you guys have set up a little studio where you guys can work, so you can record if you can't record in your bedroom. But the number of records being done in people's bedrooms, said the guy whose life depends on recording studios, is extraordinary. And the amount of work, I'm sorry, there's another session starting here in about 20 minutes, so I'm going to let somebody else answer the question. Take it.
Thanks so much. I'll pass that over to Eric.
Suck less than the person next to you for opportunity. Your worst day working in the music industry is better than most people's best day ever. So know that. And nobody cares what you do. So go for it. The world isn't waiting to see what you're going to come up with next. Nobody asked for the Beatles. Nobody asked for the Sex Pistols. Nobody asked for Jimi Hendrix or Billie Eilish or Olivia Rodrigo or Lil Nas X. Nobody asked for any of this, but we got it because people believed in the song and they believed in the music. So just go with it and just work as much as you want or as little as you want, but just don't think about it. Just do it. And if you can't get in the music industry and you want to work in publicity or marketing or PR, there's lots of businesses in your own neighborhood that could use an extra hand reaching out to the media or writing press releases or helping out with marketing with menu items if it's a restaurant or a bar or anything like that. Every business needs publicity. Every industry needs PR. So you might not start in the music industry, but you could, and just go ahead and do it because nothing's holding you back because nobody cares. Nobody's thinking about you. Nobody's eyes are on you. Just do it.
It's powerful. I would say be bold. I'm gonna say be bold. You have to get out there and you have to talk to people. You have to introduce yourself. You have to get out of your comfort zone, and that seems to help a lot because you're gonna have to knock on a lot of doors, and just work really, really hard to get the attention of people that don't know you, because like Eric said, they don't know you yet. They weren't anticipating you coming. So, and if you want to leave an impression, you gotta say hi, right? Then introduce yourself. And be bold. Just say be bold. Man. Just go for it. Go for it. That's it.
Thank you all so much. This was an amazing opportunity and amazing experience. It was so great to meet you all and have this conversation. That's going to conclude our behind the scenes music panel. This will be recorded and sent out to all of you. It was recorded, sorry, and it'll be sent out to all of you for future. And just thank you so much for your expertise and your time.
Thank you.
Really,
Thanks for having
me. Nice hang, guys.
Absolutely.
Let's do this tomorrow.
All right. See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great night. Thanks so much. And thank you to everyone who attended as well.